Players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most revered in the history of Magic the Gathering. Entomb, Reanimate, Atraxa, Grand Unifier, and many others. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy and the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind Bosch & Roll on YouTube, Arabian University, and TheEpicStorm.com. This episode is sponsored by Moxfield and financial advisor and certified financial planner Nicholas Robb.
Hello, and welcome to episode 163 of the Eternal Glory podcast, Entomb and Nadu Ban Reactions. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introduction and banter for the week, available in our supporter exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access, or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U.
I am Brian Coval, aka Bosch & Roll.
And I'm Brian Cook of The Epic Storm.
Shout out to all our new Patreon and YouTube members. Since the last episode, we've got Garrett S., Brad L., Alex K., Murray M., Mayeka Art, Aladdin, I hope that's the one from the movie, Werby King, Nolan S., Andrew, Rinsky, Lotus MTG, and Mulch Harper. If you want to join all of those people this week for our pre-show, the last few have been really hot. A lot of hot takes ripped down that, but a little subdued pre-show, a little chill. We're chilling out because we've got a little bit of good news this week. So if you want to join them and join the chill squad in the pre-show, patreon.com/eternalglory or YouTube membership.
Life happens. You can't predict the unexpected, but you can prepare. Edward Jones, financial advisor and certified financial planner, Nick Ropp, can help you with your financial goals, planning with life's ups and downs in mind. Call 314-377-9524. Email nicholas.ropp@edwardjones.com. That's nicholas.raupp@edwardjones.com. Or visit www.edwardjones.com/Nicholas-Ropp to get started. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
And if you're interested in advertising to 10,000 plus Eternal gamers every episode, reach out to us. We're always accepting new sponsors.
All right. Well, the title says it all. On November 10th, 2025, Nadu as well as Entomb were banned in Legacy. And we spent all last episode kind of analyzing what we thought needed to go from the format. And honestly, the things that left the format definitely needed to leave the format.
I wouldn't have minded a few other cards, but, fairly happy.
It wasn't our total list, but we will get into that. We have the ban article itself to dissect a little bit, and then the daily MTG stream came out. We record these on Tuesday nights, so the daily MTG stream happened earlier today, and Bryant and I both watched it. We've got some notes from that go in a little further about why they didn't ban 4 or 6 cards and why they stopped at 2. That is coming.
I think the article starting with "It's time" was very telling. They danced around Entomb for a very, very long time, but after taking out a couple of cards along the way, it just had to happen. Entomb had to go. They tried to ban around it, keep it in line. It wasn't possible.
You hate to see it leave, Phil. No, you don't.
I really don't, yeah.
I've been the voice of maybe we can keep Entomb on this podcast while you guys have been pretty strongly get it out. And the deed is done at this point. I will grieve just a little bit for the Sultai Rarebinder decks and the Loam Pox decks entombing Life from the Loam and the Storm decks that were entombing Echo of Eons. Sad for all of those decks. However, you don't keep Sensei's Top legal because Painter Servant was playing it. It had to go because Miracles was broken. And this is one of those spots. And Bryant, there is some vindication for you and the points you've been making in this article, where basically they said the years of having a a tech spread of Inkwell Leviathan, Archon of Valor's Reach, Hidespout Tyrant. These were all mentioned in the article. I can personally remember reanimating Imperial Archangel. I had a sideboard Realm Razor back in 2010, so you could beat lands. Like, this is how Entomb Reanimator used to work, but the critical mass of them printing new creatures that eventually converged on Archon of Cruelty and Atraxa to cover all situations with just 2 bodies instead of 8 or 10. This is what you've been saying the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I always compare it to Survival of the Fittest and, the creature power creep over time. But what I felt even more vindicated by was that they said they wanted the deck to be a little bit more like Sneak and Show. And I was like, yes, that's what I've been saying. If you clip out Entomb, it forces them to play more discard spells and stuff like that. And if I'm being honest with you, I've been creeping in a couple of the Reanimator spaces online, and they've been figuring out how to keep Reanimator alive, and they're talking about playing looting effects again and more creatures. And I was like, this is exactly what I've been saying. Those same spaces were hoping for maybe a Troll of Khazad-dûm unban to make it a little easier, but regardless, Faithless Looting, Careful Study, there's a lot going on right now. There's also builds that don't play those cards, so it's a fun space to explore right now if you're a brewer.
Yep, I've heard some buzz about Worldly Tutor plus Surveil lands. Surveil lands are a dime a dozen. Any fetch land can become that, so, I mean, it's slower. It requires extra, kind of half a piece. I don't really want to call a fetch land a whole piece of a combo. It's not really ABC, but putting something on top of your deck is very easy to put it in the graveyard with the tools we have access to now. Personally, I wonder why people aren't considering Gamble, because every time I cast Gamble, the card I pick goes straight to the graveyard. So there's kind of a functional sorcery version of Entomb already available if people can just, believe a little bit in how unlucky they are.
Never me, Brian.
I saw Michael Reed, Eureka, online. He tweeted out a list yesterday that honestly was an abomination, and it was not constructed well, and it looked like a complete disaster. But he did lose his trophy round playing Grixis Tempo Delver Reanimator, where he had Dragon's Rage Channelers, Surveil lands, a couple Faithless Lootings, reanimates Archon Atraxa. And it's much messier. It's not as clean as the other thing that we were doing with Entomb, but you could still tuck that shit into a deck that plays normal Magic as well. And he said in his own tweet thread, like, this deck was bad, the mana was atrocious, but, scoreboard, there's a 4-1. There might be something here if people are really not ready for it.
Yeah, I wonder if you can stitch together some, Fable of the Mirror Breaker value pile that can, accidentally reanimate things sometime. Maybe.
This is a very silly place to take this, but a while back, when Troll of Khazad-dûm was still in the format, I was asked to play a Rakdos Tarmogoyf Typal deck, and that deck did feature Value Reanimate on Troll of Khazad-dûm and Pyrogoyf, and I think I had Fable and the Mirror Breaker in that deck, and it Value Reanimate in the mid-range, where it's you can... Maybe you play 4 and 5 drops, things like Pyrogoyf, where it's reasonable to cast them, but if they get killed, countered, or if you set them up with an early loot, you can reanimate it for a reasonable amount of value. I don't know. That space is open now.
Yeah, your fear of missing out type stuff as well.
Oh, baby. I love a fear of missing out. One of my favorite cards of the last 2 years, bar none.
So all this to say, I think there's a lot of room to brew with Reanimator. Phil, I know that you've been a longtime Nadu hater. How did you feel?
It felt good. It felt real good. I have just detested the Nadu play patterns for a very, very long time, especially when you are doing non-force of will things. It was so hard to keep up with this deck and really the various Nadu decks. I am so okay with Cephalid Breakfast existing as a deck that does not get that Nadu combo redundancy and actually has to, cast some cantrips to find its A plus B. I'm so good with that. And I know some of our Cephalid Breakfast and Nadu enthusiasts have already put up multiple 5-0s with new iterations of Cephalid Breakfast featuring just a pile of Tamios. Those players are going to be fine, and everyone else gets to enjoy not having Nadu around. It is a logistical nightmare in terms of physical paper gameplay. It's slow, it's tedious. I'm glad this one is gone.
I found the article about Nadu to be really interesting in the way that Wizards of the Coast thinks about cards they think are over the line, because they actually called out Cephalid Breakfast specifically as super sweet and the type of deck they like seeing in Legacy. It's a combo deck. Let me see if I can find the exact words here. Okay, it is often a deterministic kill when it combos, repeatedly targeting Cephalid Illusionist with a lot of the same cards that play well with Nadu in order to use a combination of Narcomoeba, Dread Return, and Thassa's Oracle to seal the deal. With this deck, the opponent has very clear points where interactive hate is going to be effective. Yeah, I mean, if you Fatal Push the Nomad's Encore with the Illusionist or the Nadu on the stack, now they have kind of an unwieldy creature in play. Graveyard Hate is live. They're a counterspell on the second thing, and you can leave a dopey Nomad in play with nothing to really do. Cephalid Breakfast is a powerful Legacy power level combo deck with multiple points of interaction, including ones that just normal decks can interact with. Anyone with a Fatal Push has a chance versus Cephalid Breakfast. It was the Nadu mid-range deck that they called out specifically as being a tedious, non-deterministic flipping of cards where even though the game is over, it's not literally over. And that was just wasting a bunch of people's time. And that's what they really had a problem with.
It's why they banned High Tide and Pauper. Apparently the philosophy at Wizards is things that take a long time and struggle to win the game are problematic. Like, that's one of the biggest things that I got from this BNR update, is if you monopolize the clock, your deck might be in trouble.
And they talked about that with Modern Amulet Titan as well, which did not eat any bans, but, the sniper scope is train.
Yeah, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't want to have to find the specific paragraph live while we're recording, but basically what they said about Amulet is as its popularity increases, it might become a problem for tournament logistics. And the way that they said that's so interesting, because if it's only the dozen or so Amulet sickos who have been on the deck for 6 years now, if it's only them and they can execute quickly, then it's fine. But if your run-of-the-mill dummy starts struggling through the lines and sucking up everybody's time and sucking up the tournament clock, then it's a problem. Like, what does that actually mean? As long as only Dom Harvey plays Amulet, it's legal. But if your run-of-the-mill tournament grinder starts trying it, it's going to be a problem. I don't disagree. It's just a curious thing to think about, that might be the line for them.
I am okay with them, just going back to the Nadu section, removing undesirable play patterns. I think that's fine. And over the years, some things like Modern Eggs and Legacy Sensei's Divining Top have had some just tournament logistics, monopolizing clock problems. I'm okay with people saying, like, this takes forever, this isn't fun, we can get rid of this and do other broken stuff instead that just kills.
So speaking of undesirable play patterns, they did leave some of them legal. Oops, all spells. And I will talk about that a little bit when we get into the daily MTG update, but our podcast seems to be vocal about not loving those play patterns. There were some people that were pretty excited that they didn't touch the deck, but we'll get to that in just a little bit.
I mean, if we use the language in this Cephalid Breakfast call out, it's often a deterministic kill when it combos. Uses Thassa's Oracle to seal the deal. We put a little ellipsis in the middle of that sentence. We're talking about oops all spells, and they seem okay with that. I mean, the clear interactive points might be a little bit more challenging to find against a deck like oops, but I am fine putting oops in the cooler. Like, I don't want this to be an episode where oops all spells is coming for us. Like, hide your kids, hide your wife. Like, that's not what I'm going to try to say today. It's just like, I think oops has been pretty bad for the last 5 months, and it did just lose 2 bad matchups without getting banned itself. Expect to see it. Don't just stop playing Graveyard Hate because Reanimator's banned, but I'm willing to wait and see. I'm not going to doom and gloom on that.
I do want to say, in our previous episode, we were worried that if all of the top decks took a hit, Oops would be left as a powerful predator. Well, all of the top decks did not take a big hit. The Tamiyo decks were untouched and the One Ring decks were untouched. There are still probably more powerful things to be doing in Legacy than Oops.
I don't disagree with you, and I just want to point out how funny it is to say the Tamiyo decks weren't touched when there are 4 copies of Tamiyo in both Reanimator and Nadu Breakfast. Like, the list.
Okay, that is not a fair way to phrase that. Yeah, okay.
Right. I know what you meant. We all know what you meant. I just wanted to point out that the only time Tamiyo Inquisitive Student appeared in this ban announcement was in 3 or 4 different deck lists, including 2 of the banned deck lists that they cited. And the One Ring was not mentioned at all.
When I was doing my live reaction, I literally searched for Tamiyo Inquisitive Student and the One Ring, and I was just like, they didn't mention it at all. Like, I was just floored that they didn't even think to, like, mention it, which is another indication to me that, like, Wizards isn't listening. They don't know.
I do want to give them some credit here. I believe that we were given as a whole, well-written article with a bunch of explanations that are relatively good and show much better understanding of the format than their previous BNR update. I believe that we got an appropriately lengthy BNR update for the format that Legacy is as our casual format. And I do still wish that we got a sentence or 2.
Yeah, this is a lot better than the last one. We're not being told that ban philosophy is based on, somebody bought Underground Sea 2 years ago and they want to keep casting spells with it. The term format knowledge is not appearing anywhere in here. So this is a much better announcement than we've gotten.
The floor for being a better announcement was so low that this one had to be better. Like, I don't know if they could have gotten lower. Like, we received, 3 paragraphs and one of them explained how Oops spells works? Fuck that.
Right. Though I have seen feedback. I am not the target demographic to feel bad about this, but I have seen feedback from Reanimator diehards that saying you could still play Sneak and Show is insulting to them. What they liked was not shoving a monster in the play. What they liked was graveyard combo. So there is like a little bit of thing that could be read uncharitably if you are the affected party and you don't want to fucking play show and tell. Like, I can understand being frustrated about that. The rest of this reads pretty well, though.
Pick up Dredge, you cowards. Pick up Dredge.
Amen.
Anyway, this episode is sponsored by Moxfield.com. They're awesome. We are in a really cool period of Legacy where lots of people are going to be trying out exciting brews. If you want to see what is going to be on all of our channels ahead of time, our stuff always ends up on Moxfield before it ends up live on our YouTube videos. And if you're looking for a place to store your own brews, Moxfield is the best.
And they had the bans updated very quickly. As soon as the announcement went live, I saw Moxfield posting on socials. The bans are now reflected through all of our formats. So great job being on top of everything, Moxfield.
Gentlemen, I happened to watch the daily MTG today, and I took some notes that I thought I'd share with you. But before we hop into that, I'd like to share a little conversation I had over the weekend. Somebody in the Storm Discord listened to our last episode and mentioned the fact that I asked, why is Entomb different from Days? And I had some time to sit on that. And they said that Entomb is a pillar just like Days or Ancient Tomb. And I argued they're not. Ancient Tomb props up the entire prison archetype. Days props up tempo. Entomb is a card that goes into a singular strategy. And a one deck is not an archetype. An archetype would be aggro, combo, control. There's sub-archetypes of things like tempo, for example, or prison. And Entomb does not prop up combo. It props up a singular deck. You could argue that it goes into like some Loampox versions or like one version of Storm that isn't particularly popular. Yeah, like it goes into a couple other decks, but it's not an archetype staple. It is a deck staple. And watching daily MTG today, Carmen was asked, how could she hit Entomb? Is Entomb not a pillar? And she said it goes into one strategy, not several. I felt so much vindication with that because it plays into the macro archetype conversation that I was having with Days supporting all of tempo and, Ancient Tomb propping up prison. Entomb is only propping up really Reanimator at this point. How do you feel about that?
I'm looking at the top 10 decks on MTG Goldfish of the last 7 days right now. And with this conversation in mind of like, what is a pillar versus what is, a archetype defining card? And if Ancient Tomb were banned, for example, there are 4 of the top 10 decks on Goldfish would immediately have to be completely restructured if they can even exist at all. If Brainstorm were banned, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 of the top 10 would have to be restructured if they could exist at all. Days is in 3 of these top 10. There are cards where the metagame collapses at a fundamental level if they cease to exist. And if we just think about what the word pillar means, that is a support structure in a building. Like a pillar is called a pillar because the structure sits on it, and it would collapse if it wasn't there. We could talk about like wall decorations, I guess, if we're expanding our imagery of the format as a building. The pillars hold it up, and then there's some decorations on the wall. There's some stuff that's somewhere in between, like maybe a non-load supporting beam across the ceiling or something. I don't know. I'm not a fucking architect, but like we can see the difference between a rug pull of an entire 40% of top decks versus this deck right here. That one's a problem. We're going to deal with that one. That's a different thing completely.
So what else kind of stood out to you during this daily MTG thing?
One of the things I found most interesting was that Carmen said that unbanning Troll of Khazad-dûm was a possibility, but Legacy is tired of Reanimator being the best deck. That was the feedback that she had received over the last 2 years. People are just sick of Reanimator, and that she didn't want to risk, and I'm going to use a quote here, horse trade with Reanimator, giving them back Troll of Khazad-dûm while taking away Entomb, because she didn't want Reanimator to continue to be the best deck. If Reanimator struggles over the next, cycle or so, unbanning Troll of Khazad-dûm is more likely to happen. But she wanted to see the data and see how Reanimator would adapt without it. And I thought that was pretty interesting, just using, time as a reference to see how Reanimator does, because people do fear that Reanimator will fall off completely. I don't think it will, but there's a lot of people out there that are like, my favorite deck just died. So if it does die, they're more likely to give back Troll of Khazad-dûm to keep it alive, but it's an interesting way to manage the ban list.
And to expand on the idea of unbanning, because every time a ban window comes up, the conversation of bans and unbans come up, where it's like, we would like to see all these cards banned and all these cards unbanned. And they did talk about unbanning specifically, and Carmen said they're unlikely to do unbans when a ban is needed, because they want the unban to be the star of the announcement. We want to be excited that Troll of Khazad-dûm or Frantic Search is back and think about all the cool decks we could brew with that. We don't want that to be a footnote while we are bummed out that we lost our Reanimator and Nadu decks. It should be, the format is healthy and stable. Let's see if we can introduce something cool to it, not pulling multiple levers at once, which I don't know that they've ever said that out loud before, but it is cool to hear how they think.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really interesting because Carmen was asked, well, what about Modern right now? You made no changes here. Why didn't you do an unbanning in Modern? And she stated that, well, I don't know if Modern is actually stable. It's a little shaky right now. If things end up being stable in the next announcement, there could be an unbanning. And I was like, okay, well, it's good to know that it's just because there's no changes doesn't mean there's going to be an unban. If we view things as shaky, don't expect anything. And it gives you a little bit of a better understanding of what to expect down the road.
Right. And at the very end, Jadine said this and then Carmen repeated it. They're not trying to disrupt formats for the sake of it. That's very important to their ban philosophy. And I feel like a lot of people, especially since the Fire Design era, Throne of Eldraine, the COVID era sets, like we have shifted from a culture of bans are rare and extreme to bans should just happen every time there's an opportunity because we want to see something different. And there are a lot of Magic players who've started playing in the last 5 or 6 years who have never known a world where cards don't get banned every cycle. Meanwhile, if you've been playing 20 years, you remember 7 full years with no bans in Standard, and bans in the high power formats were very extreme and very precise. And repeating it for this new generation or the old generation who's fallen into the habits of the last half decade, if the format is a healthy rock, paper, scissors, it's going to be left alone, period. They're not going to shake it up just so they could shake it up.
Going back to Reanimator for 1 second here, I don't think Reanimator is dead, but I think Reanimator might be one of those decks that is a healthy thing that is in the bottom of combo decks that you can play in Legacy. So maybe Reanimator goes from being a, 16 or 20% of the metagame down to being a 2% of the metagame. And that doesn't mean that it is unplayable, but it is probably going to be dethroned from its, best deck of the last 2 years status pretty handily here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I don't think we've said this directly yet. We'll say it and put a stamp on it. The Legacy's gonna look different. These are high impact bans. Banning 2 cards that affect 3 of the top decks is a really interesting thing that they've threaded here of Cephalid, Breakfast, and Nadu Midrange and Reanimator were all decks that everybody had to worry about, and now they are not. So this will impact Legacy, even if it's not exactly what everybody wanted or not as much as we wanted, or everyone's got an opinion. Legacy is going to look different.
Going back to the One Ring. So I mentioned how when I was recording my reaction, I searched and the One Ring was nowhere to be found. Well, Carmen did talk about the One Ring in Daily MTG. She said there's no special protection, but obviously protection from everything. They are willing to ban the One Ring, but they want to see how things shake out. They expect a format with Wasteland, Daze, and Delver decks to check the One Ring decks. They expect Tempo to have a huge comeback, and they think that Tempo will keep the Mystic Forge combo decks in line. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So they're viewing Delver and other Tempo strategies as the answer, letting players control the narrative there. And they cited that it's not like Forge was good for an entire year. It didn't win Eternal Weekend in 2024 and then again in 2025 while being dominant the entire year through. Carmen said it was really only good for 3 months last year. And then in the middle, Eldrazi was better. I'm not sure if I entirely agree with that. I think there's some truth to it. But Carmen cited the printing of Tezzeret Cruel Captain as a major buff to the deck and why it saw a lot more play after the Vexing Bauble ban. So I do think Tezzeret was an improvement, but even before Tezzeret's printing, Forge was already on the uprise. Like, people were already figuring it out, and then it got a shot in the arm. That's how I viewed it.
It also got Ugin this summer. Like, Ugin came out to give them another top-end payoff and another way to grind, and then Tezzeret came out shortly after Ugin. So the deck won Eternal Weekend last year, ate a ban, dipped for a little while, and then received multiple printings. Also figuring out the mana base, the City of Traders just not being in the deck anymore. And that was an innovation that happened over the course of this year. And people figured out how to build it, and it also got 2 relevant printings.
And I think it is successful despite people gunning for it. There are so many Disruptor Flutes and Consigned to Memories and Null Rods floating around the format that I fully do not expect to disappear. So I am curious how the way they see this playing out. I am curious to see whether or not that is reality, when I feel like the blue decks are already gunning for this deck and are having mixed results trying to do so.
So we have our metagame predictions and metagame understandings in like the tail end of the episode. We will get into that deeper. I just finished casting the DMV Legacy Invitational Weekend, where our buddy Roland Chang was there. He made a deep run. He top-8'd the Saturday event and then made a deep run in the Sunday event with his trusty Izzet Delver. And one of the DMV League regulars made the finals of Saturday and then made a deep run Sunday, also on Is It Delver. And looking at the numbers, we saw that Delver was slightly bad against Reanimator, really bad versus midrange Nadu, and insanely good versus Mystic Forge. And these Is It Delver players, they were either using all their flexots, like main deck Surgical Extraction, to buy an edge somewhere versus Reanimator, get that one close, try to dodge Nadu, and just feast on these Ancient Tomb gamers. And the two bad ones just left the format. If Delver or Dimir Tempo, if these Wasteland Days apply damage quickly decks have room to breathe because they were bad against the other two combo decks, but they're good against this combo deck, this might be a real shift, not just a theoretical one.
Man, I think the elephant in the room was they didn't mention Tamiyo in the article whatsoever. I think if you asked every Legacy player if they could ban one card, it would have been Tamiyo. It wouldn't have been Entomb. And I was a little surprised to not see Tamiyo mentioned. Carmen said they are open to banning it, but they want to see how things shake out.
I think that's... I don't know. So I was about to say I think that's fair. I'm not sure if I do think that's fair. The play patterns of Tamiyo, when she starts running away, it's just so miserable to play against. And by running away, I mean when your opponent is on the play and casts her, it's already miserable because she's going to be in a dazed deck. If you fire removal, it gets dazed. You're way behind. If you wait, there's already a clue. If you wait too long, they brainstorm and it's not even targetable anymore. Like, I think Tamiyo is just, despite being a card with many decision points, like, do you try to flip it? Do you bank the clues? Do you brainstorm on your own turn? Do you hold the brainstorm to fade removal? Once she is a planeswalker, do you plus to the moon or do you get a card every other turn worth of advantage? Like, there's so many decision points on this card. I just wish it all happened a little slower. Like if she was a 2-drop or only flipped on your turn, or there's so many ways that this card would actually be a dope, interesting legacy card. I think it's over the line. We have seen in the past, especially with the Grief and Frog ban cycle, where both needed to go, but they only took Grief. They didn't even mention banning 2 cards out of the same deck. That seems like do less, do the minimum to make meaningful change seems to be their philosophy. And like we said at the top, Tamiyo is a 4 of in Cephalid Breakfast, in Reanimator. It was starting to poke up in numbers in Nadu midrange as well. They may have just seen Tamiyo as a supplement to all these combos that we're banning anyway. Let's see what happens when she's not in combo decks.
I understand their perspective, even if I don't agree with the decision. What I'm going to say is that for the next couple of months, Tamiyo is going to be probably thing number 1 that I'm going to keep in mind with my deck building. Like, I'm going to have Pyroblasts and Prismatic Endings and things that can answer Tamiyo on either side, preferably, because that is, I think, going to be a central card to Legacy. If Thoughtseize was previously that central card, I think it is now Tamiyo.
No, I've thought it was Tamiyo for the last 5 months. Tamiyo was the card I wanted banned last time for the no changes one 6 months ago. I think Tamiyo is over the line, and I think this is just a straight up miss where they're either not willing to hit 2 cards out of the same deck, like I just mentioned, or they just don't see the problem of Tamiyo. I watched the Daily MTG and they said it took a while to be adopted. And in my head, I'm like, that's because we had Psychic Frog in the same set. Frog's way better than Tamiyo. We had to go through that whole ban nonsense for way longer than we should have because we were a cycle behind on Grief. Then we had too many cycles on Frog. Then it took us a cycle to figure out Tamiyo, but Tamiyo had just been getting adopted 5 months ago when the no changes thing hit. And these last 5 months have been miserable trying to balance Legacy around that card. And maybe as things shift, if we no longer... If every deck in the format isn't threatening to put us in check on turn 2 anymore, maybe we get more Prismatic Endings, or there's more room for Pyroblast in the format that can kill a flip side Tamiyo, and maybe we just have more room to breathe. I don't know. I think this one's a full miss.
I have already gone on the record. I think this one goes in February.
Brian, you mentioned that 5-month ban window. We do have the tentative BNR updates for the entire year of 2026. The next one will be February 9th, the one after that, March 23rd, May 18th, June 3rd, August 10th, October 12th, and then December's TBD. The interesting thing here is that May 18th to June 3rd is a 16-day ban window. That is incredibly strange. I'm sure it's tied to some sort of set release, but it's just a very weird 16-day ban window where I doubt anything will happen. But it's a little funny, but also more opportunity to change things is a good thing. I think a 5-month ban window in the last time was incredibly stupid. I don't know anyone who would have signed up for that. Like, instead of doing the normal 4-month cadence, they pushed it back. Why not just add another one? Like, what was the downside of doing like one sooner? Like, why push it back when you could just split it? Like, I'd rather have 2.5 months and 2.5 months. But they just went the full, complete ass backwards way and made standard miserable for half the year.
I think we're past it. I think they know they fucked up.
Yes, it was by design. They wanted to let players buy and build decks with confidence to play the RCQ season that was active. And that just happened to be the duration of the standard RCQ season. And despite the fact that VV was obviously broken 2 weeks in, they had committed to riding it out. And this article and this live stream acknowledged that that didn't work out so hot. And although these dates seem kind of weird and random, especially the one with 2 weeks in between the 2 ban updates, we are getting 7 sets next year, and these are 7 dates. So I wonder if these are tied to set release in some fashion.
Another note, coming back to Oops All Spells, was that Carmen said it is most satisfying to solve issues from the player side when there's a problem in the format. And then Carmen mentioned Oops All Spells is an example of players checking a deck. Honestly, I rolled my eyes at this. I was so frustrated. I was like, oh, yeah, players are checking the deck. You mean when Dimir Tempo and Dimir Reanimator are 2 of the most popular decks that consist of Daze, Wasteland, Force of Will, Thoughtseize, plus, like, even at the end, the Dimir Reanimator decks were main decking 2 copies of Force of Negation. So they had 6 forces, Daze, Wasteland, etc. The Dimir Tempo deck had 3 copies of main deck Nile Spellbomb. Is it Delver playing a main deck Surgical Extraction? All this stuff. So we have main deck Spellbomb, Surgicals, Force of Negations, and the Oops All Spells deck still put up 51% at Eternal Weekend, only really losing to the top 3 decks. I don't think that's players checking Oops All Spells. I really don't.
Yeah, I think that's players stubbornly playing Oops All Spells in a meta that was hostile to it. And, I mean, that's fine. If you got your deck, then grind your deck. But, yeah, I don't think it is fair to say that the metagame rallied against Oops All Spells. The metagame rallied against Cephalid Breakfast and Reanimator, and Oops All Spells was just caught in the squeeze. Another thing that Carmen said was they, quote, don't want to cut the format at the ankles, unquote. And what she meant by that is there were a lot of questions. This was a live stream, and a lot of questions were coming through the chat of why didn't you take action on Mystic Forge and Tameo as well? And she basically said they banned a card out of the best deck. They banned the best green card in the format. If they also ban the best blue card and ban the best colorless card, then what? And that's kind of what at least I have been hoping for. I would love for Legacy to just be
clean slate, baby.
Picked up by the ankles, shaked upside down, stuffed in a locker, and then we figure out what's going on after that. But it seems like Wizards actively does not want to fully rug pull the format all at once. They want these things to happen gradually. And I'm sure that does protect some folks who don't have access to all cards or want to be able to make a plan around something, or it's easier to solve a metagame that's already half established rather than fully Wild West. All those things are true. I still wish they had just cut it off at the ankles. I think Legacy needs to be ankle shanked. They did take 2 big steps in the right direction. They got about half of what I would have liked. And if their philosophy is to do less, I mean, they could have given us just Entomb. At least Nadu went to.
Yes, and I will say that, like, this half measure is still a success in my mind, even if it's not exactly what I want. I'm with you. I am very much like please cut the format at the ankles. Like, Legacy being cut at the ankles sounds like that futuristic meme where it's like all of the cool flying cars and stuff going around. That is very much my vision for Tamio and the One Ring being yeeted the fuck out of here.
Yeah, that meme, Legacy of Grief, was banned the first time we knew it was a problem. Yeah, I unfortunately have not gotten to play post-ban Legacy yet. I woke up with a sore throat today and had to take the day off recording so I could do this podcast. And it's only been live for 24 hours. But there are reports I'm seeing across my social feed from known reanimator sickos and sweaty grinders it's mostly relief. Just there's just room to breathe. Somebody, it might have been Eureka for his second shout out in this episode, said, it's nice knowing that each of your end steps might not be your funeral. I think he said something like that. And yeah, just knowing that like any fetch land that represents Underground Sea isn't, well, I might be dead. That's got to just be on its own worth a lot towards playing this format and having a good time.
All right, why don't we take a quick break and then we'll start making some metagame predictions. Alrighty, welcome back. So this is where we are. Nadu's gone, Entomb's gone, Tamio and the Ring are here to stay. There are some decks that were already good and did not get hit. The Ancient Tomb stuff, especially Mystic Forge, is probably in a good place. I expect to see tons of Mystic Forge in the One Ring moving forward. But maybe we'll see some other variety of Ancient Tomb and big mana nonsense. I have really liked the Blue Post decks that I've been seeing online. Eldrazi has been, and by that I mean Eldrazi aggro, has been putting up increasing numbers.
The Ancient Tomb deck's completely untouched. And I think one of the problems with Ancient Tomb decks right now is that Mystic Forge is just obviously the best Ancient Tomb deck, especially in Ancient Tomb mirrors. So I don't know if Red Stompy, Eldrazi, and Blue Post really increased their meta position at all, but the Ancient Tomb archetypes are all unscathed.
I was called out in my ban reaction video because I said that I believed Mystic Forge, Dimir Tempo, and Upsal Spells were the biggest winners of this announcement. There was a handful of people that were like, the disrespect of Blue Post, this is the best deck in the format now. Maybe I'm a jerk. This is not shade at anyone. I don't think that deck is real. Like, I've played against it a number of times. I do like one thing. I like that they started splashing black for Bargoyf to fix the aggro matchup. That was very important. But I don't think in 2 to 3 months this is a deck that we'll be talking about as a real metagame presence. I could be wrong. It's just, I kind of struggle to believe that if this deck was ever targeted even a little bit, that it would stay on top of the metagame. I think it gets by that people don't respect it. But with Mystic Forge now being the top deck and 4 Consigned to Memory being everywhere, I think this deck is going to start seeing a lot more hate and it's going to slide.
Yeah, I do think the Blue Post deck is real, especially with the Black Splash, like you said. And I think it's going to fall into that bucket of Ancient Tomb decks against Tempo. If Izzet Delver ticks up here, which I think that it will, a Wasteland deck with Lightning Bolts and Fast Clock, because Dragon's Rage Channeler plus Delver plus Corey Steelcutter is a very different thing than Nethergoyf and Murktide Regent at the top end, with Orcish Bowmaster in between. Blue-Red just hits so much harder than Blue-Black, and I think that this deck might naturally start to struggle a little bit more in the post-ban metagame, but I do think this deck is real and needs to be acknowledged and considered when you're building your sideboards.
I think the tempo decks are going to be great. I think we are going to see very solid Izzet and Dimir tempo decks moving forward. And I think it is going to be a very real choice between them, at least at the beginning. Whereas previously, like just defaulting to Dimir and going Dimir Reanimator was just such a natural thing for blue players to do. Now I think they are going to be presented with very real reasons why to play both of those strategies. Having Thoughtseize and all of those counter spells in a world where Oops could become popular is very real. But at the same time, Izzet Delver hits like a truck, and Corey Steelcutter is very, very scary, especially if you don't have main deck answers to it.
Right. Yeah. I've mentioned a number of times in this podcast already how hard Izzet hits and being able to lightning bolt to finish them off after they've stabilized. Calling out Dimir, which is the deck that I played at Eternal Weekend. So obviously I believed in it even before 2 of its tougher matchups got banned. This deck is still fully intact. We unlocked somewhere between 1 and 3 flex slots in the main because we don't have to main deck Nile Spellbomb anymore. I probably still will play something like 1 Nile Spellbomb or a Cling to Dust, just something to respect graveyards. But we don't need 3 of that anymore. And I really like Dimir versus combo. I like it versus Mystic Forge. I like it into Oops All Spells. I like it into Sneak and Show. Give me Storm. Give me whoever you got. The wall of Force of Will plus Thoughtseize with Tamiyo. I think that Dimir Tempo is the best Tamiyo deck now, which was not true before. And I think it's the one that leverages it the best with what's left here.
Agreed. So Oops All Spells has already been brought up a couple of times. I don't know that there's too much else to say. If you want to kill people quickly and consistently, Oops is going to do that, often with some amount of discard or Pact of Negation backup. And the big thing that makes it win here is the fact that people are going to go lighter on the graveyard hate, and you aren't as frequently going to have that, like, oh, I'm stealing game 1 because I have a main deck, Surgical or Spellbomb or Tormod's Crypt or whatever.
Phil, why don't you talk about Ocelot Pride for a little bit? This is your shit.
Okay, so in our show notes, this is under the subheading of decks that were already good and didn't get hit. Wrong, this deck did get hit, just not in an obvious way. These decks fucking suck against Tamiyo. Tamiyo is a terror against your Ocelot Pride deck that is attempting to make a large number of 1/1 creatures. And Tamiyo is going to become more and more popular, and that means that it is a worse and worse time to be playing the Ocelot Pride Guide of Souls based strategies. And the One Ring is another thing that is very good at just going like, all right, I just need one more turn to get over the finish. Oh no. And then they start doing their broken things and you can't really keep up. I think 2 things that were good against this deck did not get hit and are going to become more popular. I would not be betting money on energy being good in the upcoming metagame.
That's good to hear, because that's very good against all the decks I want to play. I very rarely beat this energy deck with the decks that I enjoy. Bryant, let's move into decks that were less good but might be better section. And I want you to talk about Doomsday.
Sure. Well, Doomsday was pretty terrible against Dimir Reanimator. And without that in the format, there's one less Daze Thoughtseize Force of Will deck. I mean, there's still Dimir Tempo. But Doomsday, I think, was a pretty big winner. I lost to it today in the league I recorded. And I was a little surprised because, when you go to sideboard as a combo deck versus Doomsday, you're expecting Force of Negation and, maybe a couple other cards here or there. My opponent revealed their deck to me game 2 after resolving Doomsday. There was 2 copies of Null Rod in it. That was not something I was expecting. And with Doomsday, you can often board out your Lion's Eye Diamond, maybe a Lotus Petal or 2, and you can get away with that. It doesn't actually play that many artifacts. But Doomsday is respecting Mystic Forge combo with the Null Rod. And I thought that was pretty interesting because they can play Consign to Memory. They typically play 8 forces, and they still felt like they needed Null Rod. And I was like, there's no real downside of them playing it. So they might hit 2 to 3 of their own Lotus Petals post board, but I think that's fine. And the fact that Doomsday can play Haymakers like that means that it's going to be better in this new world. So if they can figure out how to manage Tamiyo, this deck becomes a great pick.
Do you think Doomsday will integrate Tamiyo?
I have seen some people like Michael Reed, aka Eureka, third shot out of the episode.
Hat trick.
And Wonder Pro, my boy Max Carini, playing 4 copies of Tamiyo in the sideboard previously, because people tend to board out spot removal, and then you bring in the Tamiyos, and then they're caught with their pants down, because they don't have Fatal Pushes or anything else like that left in their deck. That is an incredibly valuable strategy. That said, I think you can only do it so many times before people catch the joke, and then you're no longer able to do it. So it might be something you save for a large event like a Magic Online Showcase or Eternal Weekend or something like that.
I mean, what's the joke to catch, though? It's not like, bringing in like a Shieldred, like they did back in the day, lets your opponent know, like, if they're on that level, like leave in 2 plows or whatever. But bringing in 4 Tamiyo versus Doomsday, it's the Tamiyo problem, or whether or not it's in the Doomsday shell. Everything we said about, trying to remove Tamiyo on curve against a Daze deck, fuck you. Trying to remove Tamiyo when they have a blue open, fuck you. Trying to ignore Tamiyo to get a spot where it can actually work, but they're banking clues every turn, fuck you. So, like, what even is the joke that everyone can get in on? If Doomsday tells me I'm bringing in 4 Tamiyos as they sideboard, I'm still in bad shape against that. And it's even worse if it's a surprise.
Yeah, that's fair. I just think that if you're like a Dimir Tempo deck, you could choose to leave in 4 Fatal Push, and maybe it isn't as big of an issue with your own Dazes and Thoughtseizes and whatnot, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is it's the same thing. Like, the reason I'm lingering on this topic is because of the recent trauma of a blue-black combo deck that also can naturally slot in 4 Tamiyos with their 4 Brainstorms, Dazes, and Forces. Like, that's just the Reanimator formula that we've been up against for the last 8 months or so that they've been playing Tamiyo in that deck. And sure, you have 4 Tamiyos. I'm going to leave my 4 Fatal Pushes in. Then you cast Dark Ritual Doomsday, and I have Fatal Push in my hand. Like, that's the squeeze. And I'm really worried about Doomsday coming up with that.
I mean, it's a fair argument. You're not going to have me saying Doomsday's bad here.
Right. I'm going to go to the next one, Show and Tell. This is one that we called out on this podcast. It got, over the last year and a half or so, Stock Up and Mysterized Village were printed. And over the last ban cycle, we were like, watch out for Show and Tell when Reanimator gets banned. And then it didn't. And then Show and Tell just kind of faded because it was pretty bad against Reanimator. Reanimator is a faster combo deck with Thoughtseize, with Force of Will, and joke's on you if they ever Thoughtseize your Atraxa, dumbass Show and Tell player. They'll just reanimate it. So a huge hurdle for Show and Tell just left the format, and all those new tools that we called out on this podcast 6-8 months ago are still available to them. And Sneak and Show has been quietly just a top 10 deck on Goldfish all along. And without a natural predator in the ecosystem anymore, I think we are going to see more of this.
I have seen JPA, the Sneak and Show legend, preaching about Tamiyo and that deck as well out of the sideboard. So,
of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's another deck where people board out removal and then get punished.
I don't think we need to spend a long time on Show and Tell. This pod's winding down and we got a lot of decks to cover still. Lands.
Anytime we expect Tempo to be a great deck, I love lands. To just show up with 4 copies of Maze of Ith and Life from the Loam, it tends to feel good if you have the time to settle in for a 6 to 10 turn game. Lands was something that I thought might pick up a little bit. Maybe lands that has a white sideboard splash for some Swords to Plowshares for some additional removal as well. The big question there is just how much combo is going to be in the metagame, because lands is less good against combo. It had some natural Reanimator redundancy with things like crop rotation for Bojuka Bog and Caracas.
Yeah, we might see a rock, paper, scissors settle in where the tempo decks beat up the combo decks, lands beat up the tempo decks, and then combo beats up lands. And depending on how the combos operate, I mean, Mystic Forge just jamming freely into a non-Force of Will deck is pretty gross. Show and Tell, and they got to dodge Caracas, but Omni Show should clown lands pretty cleanly.
I will say lands versus the Forge deck, I think they're favored, because they can do the same thing the Loampox deck can, where it's Loam Waste you, Besage you your thing, Loam Waste you. And I watched a decent amount on coverage of Loampox versus Mystic Forge combo, and there's no reason why what the Pox deck was doing the lands deck couldn't do. So I think that, I mean, I've played some Mystic Forge combo too, and in the league I played recently, I got smoked by lands. Like, I don't think it's actually that bad, because I think if you clip off the Forge deck's mana base, it starts to struggle.
Yeah, that's fair. They're not without tools, that is for sure. Phil, talk to us about Death and Taxes.
I'm going to combine the next 3 decks into the same heading. So we had Death and Taxes, Dreadnought, and Control. These are your Swords to Plowshares decks. If we live in the world where people are casting Nethergoyfs and Barrowgoyfs and Delvers and Dragon's Rage Channelers, it is not embarrassing to be playing Swords to Plowshares. Death and Taxes is a deck that I have not been excited to play in quite a while. I think if I were going to be approaching the format from a Swords to Plowshares perspective, I would actually be more interested in like the blue-white Felia Blink Quantum Riddler nonsense. You get to naturally play a bunch of copies of Consigned to Memory there, which will be good against Mystic Forge, and end of turn Felia, and then get some amount of blink value with your Quantum Riddler or an Overlord, or even something simple like Teferi bounce your thing, reset the loyalty on my Teferi is totally solid.
Yeah, the blue-white Felia deck is one that I was strongly considering for Eternal Weekend in the US with the old ban rules, and that deck was close versus Reanimator, and close even after a lot of work to get Nadu. Like, we were really worried about Nadu. We like Mystic Forge just fine. We like the tempo decks. We're a back to basics deck versus lands and Mystic Forge and those stuff. This Felia Blink deck is pretty exciting to me to explore, and you get to cut some of the nonsense. Like, the deck was main decking 2 Containment Priests and 3 Dress Down. You get to cut a number of those things for other slots now.
Was that deck a 4X Tameo deck?
Yes.
Okay.
And I've had a lot of questions, like people asking me lately, are you thinking about the blue-white Felia deck for post-ban? And I said, no, it's a Tameo deck. Well, here we are. And the last section we have is decks that can adjust. And we'll do this one quick because we're running out of time here. Cephalid Breakfast, I called out immediately when Nadu was banned that Cephalid Breakfast is not going anywhere. This was a deck before Nadu. Nadu just made the deck churn on a different dimension, but it was a Tameo deck. It's still a Tameo deck. It was a turn 2 combo deck with Force of Will and Daze. It's still that. And in the 24 hours since the ban list, our boy Johan Larsson has already put up 2 trophies with Cephalid Breakfast featuring Stoneforge Mystic, which we've seen in the past as well. This is a deck with a storied history that predates Nadu, and it's just back in business.
We also might see some people exploring other combo decks that just weren't as good as Reanimator. So off and on for about the past year, we have talked about Painter being totally solid. It has tutors for its combo pieces. It has resiliency built in, especially the blue Painter builds. Being able to fish everything out of the graveyard with Emery is pretty respectable. Painter takes some amount of splash damage from Consigned to Memory and like the Null Rods and stuff. I don't know that I have the most faith in Painter, but I'm definitely seeing it in leagues already.
Yeah, Painter didn't actually benefit that much because Reanimator was negative but close, and Nadu was negative but close, but Mystic Forge is just firmly negative. The one that got through is the one that still it kicks the shit out of Painter. We'll see how the metagame shakes out. As always, if the tempo decks check the combo and then the control decks check the tempo, Painter might have a lane. But we spent 2 full years on this podcast saying Painter is secretly one of the best decks in the format. That has not been true for the last 6 months, and I don't know that that's going to change right now.
So, gentlemen, as we wind down, why don't you give me your top 3 picks for the new format moving forward?
I think I'm going to just play it safe here. I'm going to go with Mystic Forge, Izzet Tempo, and Dimir Tempo.
I am going to say Mystic Forge, Izzet Tempo, and Cephalid Breakfast.
I'm going to agree with Brian. I think Cephalid Breakfast is just a really good deck, and Larson playing the Stoneforge builds, I think, is correct. I have very good friends that play Cephalid Breakfast, and their initial gut reaction was back to Bowmasters, and I winced. I was like, I don't know if I think that's the move. I like playing Stoneforge Mystic. It helps your A plan, but you still get a solid backup plan. And the thing that I like about the backup plan is that your large equipment beats decks like Moonstompy, or it gives you a way to win without using the graveyard. Attacking for 2 over and over again with the Bowmasters isn't really a good juke, where I feel like Stoneforge Mystic is.
Long live Stoneforge Mystic. Ban legacy cards until Stoneforge Mystic is playable again is a reasonable philosophy to live by, and by golly, I think they've done it.